I'm Stuff reporter Philip Matthews, and Munted is my perspective on the Christchurch earthquakes. Over 7 episodes, we'll show how and why a New Zealand city was munted, first by Mother Nature and then by politics. This time on Munted, a visit from the cops. Things blowing up real good. And angry business owners. This was Christchurch in 2011. In this episode we ask, what happens when the government takes over your city centre and then knocks it down?
The spire of the Christchurch Cathedral has fallen down.
185 people were killed by the 6.3 magnitude earthquake that hit Christchurch just after lunchtime on February 22nd, 2011. If the 5 months in September had felt like a phony war, a time weirdly suspended between disaster and good luck, all of a sudden here was the real thing. Around 2/3 of the dead died in one location, the CTV building that collapsed on Madras Street near Latimer Square. Many more buildings collapsed and others were pulled down because they were deemed unsafe. This series is about what happened next to the city's people and its politics. As the people of Christchurch got on with working out how to live in their homes and do their jobs, and wondering if they could flush their toilets or even drink the water after the earthquakes, the centre of Christchurch was cordoned off and mostly stayed that way for more than 2 years. People were shut out of their own city. Many shops and businesses were left exactly as they were on the morning of February 22nd. Business owners were angry that they couldn't get back into the city to retrieve the belongings they needed to keep trading.
We just want to keep working. That's all. And we want to work in Christchurch and we want to rescue Christchurch.
This anger came to a head with a protest just a month after the February quake.
These guys are going to haul us off. They've got huge powers and they are here for one task only, and that's to stop us going near our businesses. Come out and talk to the people whose lives you're wrecking. I understand you're doing what you have to do, but if I was you, I'd be ashamed and embarrassed. Very hard.
The police intervened and things got a bit heavy.
Oh, we're making an arrest.
It's very dangerous in there. We've already had a very large number of deaths from this incident, and we don't want to have any further.
Army soldiers at checkpoints added to a sense of a city under occupation, a city taken away from the people who lived in it. And behind that cordon, the government got on with the job of largely demolishing the city centre. By July 2011, 5 months after the 6.3 earthquake, the city was seeing 124 demolitions per month, or an average of 30 per week, or 4 per day. Around 20% of those were heritage buildings. It was a bleak sight, even for those who allegedly knew what was going on, as rebuild boss Roger Sutton admitted 2 years later.
It can feel incredibly desolate to me, yeah, it can be really depressing. You know, if I go off to parts of the city which are still buildings being demolished, I find that really frustrating. I hardly ever come out of the red zone from the really demo bits saying, gee, I really loved being in there.
Even Gerry Brownlee could relate to the confusion many felt in a flat city without landmarks.
We've only got to look out the windows to see what has happened in the demolition sense. And it's hard for people, I think, to grasp sometimes exactly where they're standing in the city because there's been so much lost. It is, quite breathtaking, actually, to see how much empty space exists around us.
But not all of Christchurch's demolitions were bad news. Sometimes they were picturesque or spectacular, as we saw in the controlled demolition of the Newstalk ZB building. It livened up an otherwise grim day in the post-earthquake city. Unsurprisingly, the demolition of the police building was also very popular, and it wasn't just because people had a strong aversion to the architecture. Gerry Brownlee had set the tone for the wholesale flattening of the city within days of the earthquake when he said that the old dungers were going under the hammer.
The city is going to look very, very different once all the demolition is completed. But I think there's real urgency now to get that done. I think most of the sentiment around buildings has gone as people realise that there's not a lot of hope for most of these buildings. I know there's a big push to try and save High Street, but frankly, have a look at it. That type of work would hold everybody else up for quite a long, long time.
Emergency powers introduced by the government allowed for swifter and easier demolition. There was to be no more pointless sentimentality about heritage and tradition. Not even for the much-loved buildings that had defined Christchurch for more than a century. Brownlee welcomed the Anglican Church's hugely provocative decision to pull down the damaged cathedral that stood at the heart of the city.
I think the Anglican Church must have done the right thing. In the end, a building is a building. It is the life that comes from the people who use those buildings that gives it its true soul.
But it wasn't just old dungers that were threatened with the hammer. Even new dungers weren't safe from the overwhelming urge to destroy. Politician Lianne Dalziel summarised the absurdity of one well-known corner site when she prepared to run for mayor in 2013.
Okay, so behind me is the West End building, and this was the first building of the rebuild. But of course it replaced the jeweller's shop, which became the kind of picture postcard for the damage after the September earthquake.
A building that had been rebuilt had to be demolished all over again to fit the government's predetermined plan.
This is crazy. This is the sort of things that are going wrong in the city.
If you were looking for metaphors for a city under occupation, you could also go a little further east into the residential red zone. The mass abandonment of family homes on damaged land mirrored the clearing of the CBD. And while we waited for houses to be demolished, the army and police used them for training exercises. Next time on Munted, the people of Christchurch dream up a new city, but the government has other ideas.